When I first started looking at 18-inch gaming laptops, the biggest thing that kept me up at night was the same story I keep hearing from other gamers. The picture on the product page looks sleek. The specs read like a mini desktop. But once you actually open the lid, the experience feels underwhelming. You end up with a massive machine that looks cool on the desk, yet it struggles to keep up with the games you love, or it drains the battery so fast you're tethered to an outlet. I've been through a handful of those disappointment loops, so I wanted to make sure this review actually helps you avoid the same mistake. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. The ASUS ROG Strix G18, 2025, is the newest entry in the big screen niche, promising a full-size 18-inch display, a RTX 5050 GPU, and a Ryzen 9 8940HX processor. Those are impressive numbers on paper, but the real question is how they translate when you're sitting in a cramped apartment, switching between a 27-inch monitor for work and a couch-side session of Cyberpunk 2077. Let's break that down. First off, the display. ASUS went with a 1610 FHD Plus panel that runs at 144 Hz with a 3 milliseconds response time. In theory, you get smoother motion and a bit more vertical real estate than the typical 16:9 laptop. In practice, gaming on the G18 feels genuinely fluid in fast shooters like Valorant and Apex Legends. The high refresh rate really shows. The extra height is also handy when you're scrolling long Discord chats or editing footage. You get an extra line or two of content without squinting. The only downside is that the panel is still limited to 1080p resolution. If you're used to 4K laptops for image-intensive titles, you'll notice the pixel density is a little soft at close range. For most gamers, though, the trade-off leans toward faster frame rates rather than razor-sharp detail, and the 144 Hz refresh makes that a worthwhile compromise. Now, the heart of any gaming laptop is the GPU and CPU combo. The RTX 5050 isn't the top end of the RTX lineup, but paired with the Ryzen 9 8940HX it forms a solid middle ground. In everyday use, streaming, web browsing, light video editing, the laptop feels snappy. Launching Chrome with a dozen tabs and an occasional YouTube video is basically instant. When you crank up a demanding title like Elden Ring on high settings, the RTX 5050 holds its own at 1080p, usually hitting 6070 frames per second with DLSS enabled. That's respectable for a laptop in this price bracket, and you'll notice the difference when you actually sit down to play versus just looking at benchmark charts. One area where the G18 shines surprisingly is its memory and storage configuration. The 16 GB of DDR5 5200 RAM is fast enough to keep up with modern multitasking, and the 1 TB NVMe SSD provides ample space for a growing game library. I've tested loading times on several AAA titles, and most of them pop open in under 10 seconds, no more waiting through those long boot screens that some older laptops still have. The SSD also speeds up things like asset streaming in open-world games, meaning you get fewer popping textures when you sprint across a crowded cityscape. Thermal management is where many big-screen laptops stumble, because packing all that hardware under a larger chassis can create hot spots. ASUS equips the G18 with its ROG Intelligent Cooling System, which combines a dual-fan layout with vapor chamber technology. In a typical 30-minute gaming session, the CPU temperatures settle in the low 80 SC, and the GPU hovers around the mid-70 S. That's warm, but not enough to trigger throttling. My real-world test was a back-to-back run of Shadow of the Tomb Raider followed by a stress test in MSI Afterburner. The laptop maintains stable clock speeds throughout. The downside is the fan noise. When the fans kick in, they are audible enough that you'll hear them through headphones, which can be mildly distracting in quieter games. It's a trade-off. You get cooler components at the cost of a little acoustic intrusion. Battery life is another practical concern. With an 18-inch chassis, the G18 houses a 96 Wh battery, which sounds generous. In reality, you can expect about 4 to 5 hours of mixed usage, some gaming, some video streaming, some web browsing. That's actually better than many 15-inch gaming laptops that claim similar numbers, thanks to the efficient 12th Gen Ryzen architecture. Still, if you plan to game unplugged for long stretches, you'll need to keep a charger handy, or accept lower graphics settings to stretch the juice further. Port selection on the G18 feels thoughtfully laid out for a gamer who also works remotely. There's a full-size HDMI 2.1 port, a USB-C with DisplayPort and power delivery, 3 USB-A 3.2 Gen 2 ports, and an Ethernet jack. That means you can hook up a dual monitor setup for work, then plug in a headset, external mouse, and a fast Ethernet cable for competitive play without swapping cables. The Wi-Fi 6E module supplies a solid wireless connection if you're on a modern router, and the inclusion of Windows 11 Home out of the box means you're ready to roll without fiddling with OS installations. Who should buy the ASUS ROG Strix G18? If